This is James O'Donnell. He was one of the survivors of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Or on the other front, I should. France.
You know, you got to know your geography, you know, to say it. If you don't, you run into a...
Start over, please.
Ross Brewer. My brother was Glenn Ross. He was 19 years old when the ship went down.
I was,
Dick said you gave him one.
okay. But I moved from Seymour in about 1950. I was in the service at the time that he was lost at sea. In fact, I was notified August the 15th, 1945 that he was missing in action. And I've been very active in the organization since 1960. My wife and I are very active. We've been to Texas and Colorado and numerous places with the group. Been to Hawaii, in fact. We certainly enjoy this group. Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell has come today to speak to us about this very, very interesting workshop. I've got a few people I want to introduce before he speaks to us. I've got some things to pass out, and yeah, if you would. Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, but okay, now, okay, and Betty, would you mind passing out the bibliographies, please?
I think we're just depend on kind neighbors with pens and pencils to everybody to help fill these out.
Okay, from the circulation desk by the water fountain. If you want to grab those books today after he talks. Okay, there are a couple people I want to introduce. I want to introduce the mayor.
My name is John Burkhart, and I'm the mayor of the city of Seymour. Council President Mike Jordan and I have a, come on up here, Mike. We get to do a lot of things, most of which are fun, some of which are not a lot of fun. This is one of the fun things we get to do. Jimmy, come here. I don't know if you know, Jimmy's a former city employee also, the city of Indianapolis. We'll find out more about that, right? Stand over here, please. Today I've issued the following proclamation, which Mike and I have both signed. To whom all these presents may come greetings. Whereas James E. O'Donnell was a survivor of the sunken USS Indianapolis, where it was estimated that 300 men died during the initial attack, and of the remaining 900 men endured 4 days of shark attacks, exposure, and thirst before they were discovered by an airplane for routine patrol. And whereas only 316 of 1,196 men of the crew survived the final 4-day ordeal, and stories of the sinking of the ship have been featured on educational television and the movie Jaws. And whereas in addition to receiving the Purple Heart, James E. O'Donnell was honored as the Indianapolis Star and News Man of the Year in 1995, Sagamore the Wabash Coal Man of the Year in 2001 for the H&R to the Hibernians, and one of these days you're going to tell me what that is. I know where Hibernia is, but I'm not sure. I bet there's not too many people in here who know where Hibernia is. Is involved with the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, the AMVETS, and is a retired firefighter. And whereas 2 Jackson County men, Thomas Leon, is it Leon or Leon? Leon Barksdale of Seymour and Glenn Eugene Ross of Norman were lost at sea on the USS Indianapolis. Now therefore, I, John S. Burkhardt, Mayor of the City of Seymour, Indiana, and Michael T. Jordan, President of Seymour City Council, do hereby declare Saturday, January the 12th, 2002, as James E. O'Donnell Day in the City of Seymour, Indiana. Hope you have a great visit. And if you get in trouble while you're here, don't call me. Make sure you park right.
Yes, I would like to, before Tom, you start in again, you introduce him. I would like to thank the Friends Library for funding this. Without them, we couldn't have done that. So let's give a round of applause. And on your bibliography, there is a line that says, if you have any workshops that you would like to recommend that we teach, please write them down. Well, I would like to introduce someone who not only recommended that we teach a workshop, but he did most of the legwork in getting Mr. O'Donnell here, Tom Melton. Thank you very much.
First thing I'm going to do is I would like to introduce the family members that are related to the two men from Jackson County. First of all, would Andy Barksdale please stand up? This is the brother of Thomas Leon Barksdale, former senior now living in Brownsburg, Indiana. And also, there's other people here with any other family members of Thomas Leon Barksdale, please stand.
Stand up.
Surprise too this morning. I had tried to find some family members of Glenn Ross from Norman, and I was unsuccessful in that. But this morning, at the library, and looking at the displays, we ran across his sister. And I think I'm being waved at by somebody else in the back, so somebody else has shown up. So I know your name, Ruth Brewer, Indianapolis. Would you please stand? Stand up and introduce yourself.
Ruth's mother and my grandmother were sisters, and I didn't want Glenn not to be represented. Hi, Ruth.
Surprise this morning. It made that one moment made the whole weekend worthwhile for me. That she was able to show up and meet some of these other people. So I don't know that I really need to introduce Mr. O'Donnell anymore. I think there and my wife. That's right. We'll do that. I don't want to get in trouble with the women folk. Mary Alice O'Donnell, will you please stand? She was the young lady at the time who received that telegram from the War Department. So that's an experience, and I don't think there's too many people who have gone through that, other than the family members who have.
My first husband was killed in World War II.
That's an experience that, as I said, not many people in this room can relate to. So without further ado, like I said, I think the mayor and Mike Jordan have sufficiently introduced Mr. O'Donnell, so we'll begin the program. You know about film, I just
What we have is a short film, about 30 minutes, that kind of goes through what it was all about. And then I'll tell you my experiences afterwards. And then if you have any questions, why, I'll try to answer them. Put it that way.
My wife says I know how to make this thing, but this has got more buttons than one phone, so we'll see what to do here. There's some light switches along the sides over there.
Pretty well tells the story of the ship. In my part that I played, or happened to be on it, so to speak, not playing. You didn't play back then. I was working at Allison's, and every time you got put in 1A, why, they'd get you deferred. I was a machine repairman. They were making the parts for the engines that they were making for the airplanes. I guess they finally ran out of deferments because in February of '44, I got my notice. And everybody here, I got my notice and went up to the lakes, had a little training, come home. I think I had a week at home. And then I was shipped to the West Coast, to Shoemaker, California. And the Indy was at Frisco, and they needed 5 men, and I happened to be one of them that was chosen for the replacements. So that was in April of '44, so I had a little over 14 months on her. Was at Saipan, and I don't know whether any of you people have seen bodies after they've been dead for a little while or anything like that, but there in Saipan, why, pardon, they ran them all down to one end of the island and they jumped off a cliff. And they'd come floating by the ship there. Now, I know I'm pretty big, but when you're about 3 or 4 times as big as I am, why, it's not a very good sight to see. I'm sure from the looks of a lot of the faces in here, a lot of you fellas are servicemen yourself and have seen a lot of this in your own foray that you were in. But anyway, then the next one was Tinian, which is a little island right about 4 miles from Saipan. Then the next one was down at Guam. Pardon. And we had a captain aboard then that was the last captain to pull anchor out of Guam Harbor. And you might know he wanted to be the first one to get back in there. So he pulls right in real close to the beach and drops the hook, and they could have picked you off with a rifle from the beach. And at that time, we were the flagship of the 5th Fleet. We had an admiral which graduated from Shortridge High School in Indianapolis, a fellow by the name of Raymond Spruance. And then we went under the 3rd Fleet with all the same ships, but just a different admiral in charge of the operation. We went in the 3rd Fleet, went down to Peleliu and Anguire, then back under the 5th Fleet again. Why, we were at Okinawa, and that's where we took a suicide plane and had 9 men killed and 26 injured. And I happened to be down in my bunk at that time when the plane hit us, and if any of you are familiar with the ships, they battened down the big hatch, and all they had was a small scuttle hole to come out. Well, if you've ever seen rats coming out of a hole, why, that's the way we were coming out of that sleeping compartment. But anyway, we managed to limp back to an island, and they put a patch on us, and we limped back to the United States doing 6 knots. If you've ever seen a baby crawl across the floor, why, that's about 6 knots. And we got back and got repaired, and after we were repaired, we were back at Frisco again, and they did bring the atomic bomb down and load it aboard. Nobody knew what it was, and my wife and some other friends used to always go to the Golden Gate Bridge and watch us go out. But in this instance, why, we were long gone time they got out there to watch us go. I mean, after that was loaded aboard, why, the skipper put her in the wind, and we did 29 knots all the way to Tinian. We had a layover about 6 hours in Pearl, just enough to refuel and take on provisions. After that, we left Tinian after unloading the bomb, and nobody knew what it was. Like you said, I don't think the captain even knew. Only thing his orders were was to get there as fast as you could. Anyway, we left there and went to Guam and got orders to go to Leyte to meet the Idaho for gunnery practice for the invasion of Japan. Well, he asked for an escort. These are a lot of things that are just coming out now. He asked for an escort and they refused him. They didn't tell him the submarines were out there, because we were going to go right through the path where the submarines had sank one of our ships the week before. When we didn't arrive, why, their excuse was, well, a combat ship may be diverted someplace else. But anyway, we got about halfway there, and a Jap submarine, the I-58, got us with 2 torpedoes. The first one took the bow off, and the second one hit a magazine. It must have just ruptured everything, because it just knocked the communications out, and it just kept going forward, turned over on its side, went right straight down in about 12 minutes. I know when you're waiting on somebody, 12 minutes is a long time. Sometimes it's not. Anyway, after, you were always required to wear a little rubber life preserver at all times, and then they had bags around the ship where there was K-Pop life jackets, and we went to the bags and got a K-Pop life jacket. And when the ship was on its side, I walked down the side of the ship and slid down between the bottom of the ship and the shafts. And like the doctor had said in there, you got this fuel oil all over you, got in your eyes, and it burnt real bad. You threw up, and it just covered you all over. After I'd swim a little bit of ways, I turned back and looked, and all you could see was the back of the ship going down. And if you didn't stay in a group, like we are here today, if you didn't stay in a group, if you was out there by yourself, the shark had you. There was no other way. And some of the life rafts did get off and everything, but most of the fellows were in K-Pop life jackets, and groups of anywhere from 10 to 30 or more, and you'd hold on to one another, and that's the way you survived. And it wasn't until, like this submarine patrol plane come through there, tells you he swooped down to see what he had down there, but he didn't tell you that he had his bomb bay door open, ready to dump a couple of depth charges, because he thought he had a submarine when he seen these fellas waving their hands. And then this PBY came out later and landed in the water, which they almost court-martialed him because that was a no-no. But he got 56 men out of the water and transferred them onto the Cecil Doyle the next day when it got there. I was picked up by the USS Bassett, and part of us were taken to Peleliu and part of us were taken to Seymour. I was taken to Seymour in the Philippines, and about 2 weeks later, why they regrouped us at Guam, at the hospital at Guam, and the CB, or not the CB, but the submarine rest camp there at Guam. And it was a lot better than what you'd had the other places. And we were there then, and after they had dropped the bombs, well, Japan decided to surrender. So normally, under circumstances like that, well, you would have got home right away, you know. But since they sent all the ships to Japan to get the prisoners of war that had been there for years, which I think was the right thing to do, why, this happened the 30th of July. I got home the end of September. And I had a 30-day leave and everything, and I thought, well, the war's over and everything. They'll probably send me to Lakes now, and I'll get out. Well, I go down after my leave is over and report to the federal building. The guy says, you might as well go on home. You're not leaving till tomorrow. I said, well, you got any idea where I'm going? He says, yeah, you're going to the West Coast for new construction. So here they send me back to the West Coast. And when I get out there and finally, with all the rigmarole, you're used to it, why the transfer of orders and so on and so forth, why it takes a little while. Well, I can't use the words the man said that when I got into the new construction pool, but he says, you got too many points. Because in World War II, you got a point for all the different engagements and things you were in. I just don't know exactly how they were counted up, but I was within a half a point in my week less than 23 months of having it. We're lucky enough to celebrate our 59th anniversary last December. So it's been very nice. We have 3 boys and 1 girl, and I'm lucky to say that they're all doing fine too. Well, that's about my story. So if anybody has any questions about any of it, why, you can shoot them at me. I'll try to answer them. Yes, sir.
That K-Pop Life Vest, didn't they get saturated after just a few hours in the water and
You
become
start out with water like this, and at the end it was like this. And like they say, didn't you see this or that or the other thing? Well, with the little ripples in the waves out there, you couldn't see. As a matter of fact, I never even seen those 2 planes that came out there that rescued the guy. Like I say, I was picked up by the USS Bassett, which got there. I think, according to mine, I was in the water a little over 108 hours or so, like that. And they had put their wheelboats out, and they found me. Yes, sir.
How many weeks did it take you to become familiar with
Not too long. I was with saltwater ulcers and everything like that. And another thing, when they started to get the guys out of the water, they started to grab them by their arms and stuff, you know, which would be normal. And being out there so long, skin just peeled right on down. And so they finally had to start grabbing them by their life preservers. Yes, ma'am. Well, I don't like to get into that. It was all politics. Is really what it was. The word that we get was the Admiral King, who was in charge of the court-martial. Now, McVeigh came from a naval family. His dad was an admiral, his grandfather was an admiral, and he would have been too. And anyway, this Admiral King was under his father down in the Philippines in his early part of his career when he was an ensign or something like that, and he pulled a boo-boo or something, did something wrong and got rolled up. So whether it was my time to get even or what, I don't know. But out of 700 ships that we lost approximately, there's only 1 court-martial. And you know something's not just right there.
Do you think it would have been avoided, the tragedy would have been avoided if the ship would have continued to zigzag at night? Or were they
No, ma'am, at
chasing
that
it?
time of the war, the zigzagging was passé. You know, the submarine commander, he said that it wouldn't have made any difference whether he was zigzagging or not. All I'd have had to do is maneuver a little bit and would have got you. And at the court-martial, there were some of our submarine commanders said the same thing. Now, I wasn't at the court-martial, so don't ask me about that.
What was the problem with the communication?
I can't hear you.
What was the problem, why there had been no communication?
Well, it knocked out all the power. And that's another thing I didn't mention. But they supposedly did get an emergency generator going and did get an SOS off. There were some ships that had heard it, but they had no way to communicate back with us. And they had even heard it on Leyte. And when they told the higher-ups about it and everything, they said, well, a lot of times that's a hoax by the Japanese to get ships out there so they could sink some more. what they have done, the Senate and Congress have exonerated him for the loss of the ship and the loss of lives. But the court-martial is still on the books. Now, as I understand it by talking to a fellow out of the Defense Department, the only way we thought that the president could do it, but the only way it could be done, according to him, is there has to be a new law enacted to allow somebody to be able to do that. We have a reunion every 2 years in Indianapolis at the Westin Hotel.
When you went overboard, were the props still standing?
Can't answer a truthful question there.
You said you went past the sharing.
I imagine they were.
Is there anywhere you can buy the videos that you just showed?
No, ma'am. That's one that's been cut down from a lot of others, so when you come to a function like this, you're not wasting all the people's time. It's just enough to give them an idea of what it was all about. Somebody over there?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what was your position on the ship?
I was what they called back in those days a water tender. I was in the boiler room where you made the steam that went to the engine room to make the ship go. I don't think they have that rank anymore. I think it's boiler technicians, and with the nuclear age, I wouldn't want to guess what they call it. I was back aft by number 3 turret, right where the kamikaze plane had hit us. Because if you would be down in your bunk, why, it was so hot down there, why, you'd probably wake up in a pool of water. But if you could find a spot up on the main deck, you might get a little breeze. Because just like out there in the water, it was 110, 120 degrees with the sun, the reflection and everything. And at night it would get down to 90, which is hot, isn't it? It was cold. The thermal balance in your body and everything just didn't work that way out there. Yeah.
What was your first clue that you were about to be rescued?
I guess when they grabbed me out of the water. That's about the closest I can come to it, because I didn't see those planes or anything else. And I think a lot of us slept, like more or less out of it for a while, you know, hallucinating and everything else. Because it's just like they said on the film there, guys would say, oh, there's a ship out there, and they'd swim away. You never see them again. There's an island over there. They'd swim away. You never see them again. I'm thirsty, I'm going down to the mess hall and get a drink. They dive down underwater and swallow a bunch of that salt water. About 4 hours, they're gone. Their throat all swelled up. They're gone.
Did all the survivors survive? I mean, after they were rescued, or did some of them not survive?
No, the actual total that they picked up was 321, but 4 of them died before they got to either Peleliu or Seymour. Somebody else have their hand up back there?
Besides this tragedy, what was maybe the most memorable moment on the ship?
Well, I don't know. It seemed like in the short time I was on it, we went through some daggone mess. It was. But see, the ship gained 10 battle stars. That's what these stars are on there. The ship gained 10 battle stars. In the short time I was on it, I'm entitled to 5. Now, they started out up around the Aleutians and up in there, and that's doing stuff there. I think they sank the ship up there and everything. I don't know how many airplanes we had sank, knocked down 7 or 8, something like that. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on
What were the firemen's duties again on that ship?
that. You mean like my job?
No, my brother was a fireman. What was his duty? Exactly.
Well, he was probably a striker for one of the rates either in the fire room or in the engine room, or he might have been in the oil king shack. That was part of it, where they had to keep the balance of the ship. If you used up this tank of oil, you had to fill it with salt water to keep the ballast.
It was oil, fire, it was oil,
Yes.
not coal.
Oh, no. Oh, we was past that stage. We were oil.
How many actual rescue were there? You said 2 ships and 2 planes, how many?
Oh, I forget now how many there was. There was probably 6 or 7 ships that arrived, and there were some other planes that came out there, but none of them landed. Well, there's somebody trying to claim now that one of them landed in the water and got one guy out of the water. I don't know. And so I really don't know exactly how many of the ships were out there and everything.
At the time that they spotted you, knew that there were people down in the water, how long until there was grass or something where you could get most of the people out of the water? How long until the people were there?
12 hours or better. And see, these ships put out their whaleboats and picked up the guys.
How did you exist for 3 days? Did you eat or drink or anything?
Oh, I didn't have anything to eat or drink at all. Some of the guys on the rafts, I understood, had some crackers and maybe some Spam, something like that. But I think it was rationed out in very small quantities.
People trying to get off the rafts, were they?
Well, I imagine they were, yes. Sure. But a lot of them had people that were injured with broken legs and arms and burnt bad and stuff like that, which a lot of them passed away, right? Wasn't too long.
Hey, did you said they dropped the rafts out of the airplane to you guys?
I'm sorry?
You said they flew over and dropped the rafts out of the airplane, out of one big plane down to you guys, did they? And,
Yeah, that one plane, that PBY, that's what he said he did. Of course, like I say, I never seen either one of those planes, so I can't tell you truthfully on that.
You know, would you be strong enough to get on a raft like if you was in like...
Some of the fellas supposedly swam to them and got on them,
I don't know if they'd be like weak from being in the
but I
water
would
for so long.
think you'd be so weak, it'd be hard to do.
Did you have any close encounters with the sharks yourself?
Oh, you could look down underneath you all the time and see them. And 2 fellas that went to Seymour where I went, one of them had teeth marks on his ankle and one of them had teeth marks on his buttocks where the shark had took a shot at him and everything. But you see, the reason you couldn't see a lot of those planes and things like that, you could see them go overhead all the time. Right? We were scattered out probably over 50 miles or better, because the last 2 ships out there searched a 200 square mile area and found over 100 mutilated bodies.
It seems very rough, but the time we were out the 5 days, it was fairly calm.
It was fairly calm, yeah. By one time out there, I think it was on a Sunday one time, not at this experience there, but it was just like a sheet of glass. If you ever seen the ocean calm down to where there's no ripples or nothing, it's just like a sheet of glass. I did happen to see that one time. And like where you're standing, it might be pouring rain like ever. Where I am over here, it didn't rain at all. Of course, that does that in town, too. Does anybody else have?
What about when the kamikaze plane hit you guys up? Was that like the only one out there, or was there a group of them, or?
Oh, there was. We were at the invasion of Okinawa. They hit 300 ships, and we lost 32 up there. Yeah, see, if we'd have went for the invasion of Japan, I think they had like around 500 kamikaze planes there, and it's a one-way trip. You know, you got enough fuel and shot a sack before you leave, and a one-way trip out there to do your duty. And another thing, did you ever hear of ketons? Anybody ever hear of ketons? Well, what that is, it's a person that guides a torpedo, rides a torpedo into a ship. This submarine that got us had 6 of them aboard, and they wanted to be allowed to do it, but he didn't. He fired 6 torpedoes, normal torpedoes at us, and got us with 2. But as a matter of fact, we were the only ship that captain ever sank.
Did he testify against you guys?
He testified against the court-martial, at the court-martial.
Why would he, what was the deal? Why would he testify?
Like I said before, I think it was all politics.
The United States Navy brought him to Washington to testify against Captain McVeigh. He was scared to death. He thought he was being brought to this country to be put on trial or something happened to him. If you read some of the books, he was astounded. Here he is. The war's only over 6 months, and he's testifying against an American captain. He was amazed. It backfired on the Navy because basically he said, I would have hit him regardless of what the captain had done.
As a matter of fact, after the war, he became a Shinto priest. And he just died a year or so ago. He was 91 years old. Also, one of our fellows met him at the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and he asked if it'd be proper if he could lay a wreath and on the Arizona, and they said, well, sure, go ahead. And then he told them that the bomb that they had dropped on Hiroshima wiped out his whole family. So, I mean, it's, you know, a lot of you guys I know have been in the service and everything, and if you went and a lot of you people have been in tight spots too, and if you make it and come back, it's only one thing, you're lucky. There's a good man upstairs was looking at you.
Was McVeigh a good skipper?
Well, the common ordinary man didn't get too much to do with the officers outside who's in charge of your group. But as everybody said, he was a real nice guy.
Did you know that the 2 gentlemen?
No. No, I didn't. As a matter of fact, like it says, 1,196. Well, actually, we had one Petra. It was 1,197. And the ship was so big, it's just like the city. You don't know the guy lives on the other side of town. You know, if you work with him, maybe. But otherwise, you wouldn't know him. You know, or just like that, if he worked the other end of the ship, you wouldn't know him. Just by chance, you might, if you'd run into him in the mess hall and get the jawbone or something, you might, you know, get to know him or something like that. But otherwise, no.
Did you know any of the people that were around you in the water?
Well, the 2 guys that went overboard when I did, I knew them, but I never did see them afterwards. Neither one of them made it. And you've just got acquainted with them through the reunions now. As a matter of fact, out of the fire room I was in, there's only 2 of us that made it. The other fellow lives down in Texas.
Where's the memorial that they refer to as film?
It is in Indianapolis. If you're familiar with any of the streets up there, you know where Senate Avenue is? Okay, north on Senate Avenue to Walnut, which is 700 north, turn west, and you can just go back to where the new water company canal is, and you can walk down to it. As a matter of fact, Indianapolis is, I think, proud because all the national monuments, there are, most of them are in Washington, D.C., and Indianapolis has two. The Congressional Medal of Honor is there, and it is a national monument too.
My question to you was, when you become aware of what was happening, do you know that the ship is down, or did you become aware of it?
I can answer that. If you look at this telegram up here, it's like it said that they didn't announce it in the paper for 2 weeks. She got her telegram the day before they put it in the paper.
Before the war ended.
You were out of the water and safe before she did anything happen.
And he was always not to mention, should we resign, but it said he was wounded in action. It said, please don't mention it because we can't really have a mission. Came out the night before the war was in. Everybody was celebrating all over town. I wasn't there to celebrate.
Do you have a question? Or just...
I do have a question. Were you wounded? I mean, other than oil and...
I was all full of saltwater ulcers and everything else happened.
But you were the shark bit or...
They don't bite bad meat. Not for a nasty answer.
How old were you when the sinking occurred, and how
25.
How long have you been married?
About 4 years.
Fuel oil affects your eyes anyway.
Yeah, that fuel oil gets in your eyes, it just burns like the devil, you know. You'd float around, you'd get washed off a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're back in another oil slick.
You might tell them what happened to Captain McVeigh.
Oh, Captain McVeigh, of course there's a lot of conflicting stories about it, but the way it comes out that his wife, or they, I should say, used to get hate mail, phone calls and everything like that, and she intercepted most of them. And she put them all in a drawer. Well, when she passed away, he happened to find them, and there's still people living today that think he was the cause of all of it and everything, which he wasn't. And he finally took a little toy soldier he had, dressed up in his uniform, went out front step, did himself in 1968. He committed suicide.
In the 55 years since your experience, haven't you read of a lot of other instances where top brass was watching out for their own careers, putting the blame on people like Captain McVeigh? That wasn't an isolated instance of that type of, such as Pearl Harbor.
Well, one other thing I forgot to mention too. You see, they had broken the Japanese code. And they didn't tell him themselves were out there, but they knew they were out there because they had broken the code and knew that they had sank the Underhill the week before. Well, the sad part about it was, after he had sank us, he sent a message back to Japan saying that he had sank a large vessel out there and thought it was a battleship. So now if they had broken the code, they knew we were out there. Anybody?
Was it just unnoticed by anyone, that it just looked like the regular cargo, or was there just speculation?
Well, when you're called back and Liberty's over at 6 o'clock in the morning and 2 big trucks pull up there with Marines all around, they drop the hook over, put those 2 in the hangar deck, because we used to have 2 observation planes, and then these other fellows went up into the extra captain's cabin, because we was a unique ship. Being a flagship, we had like 2 captain's cabin where the admiral stayed when he was aboard, and these 2 couriers stayed in there, and one of them never left. If you went to dinner, I was there. If I went to dinner, you were there. Well, I imagine everybody speculated what the heck it was, but I don't think they knew the answer. Anybody else have any questions? If they don't, it's been my pleasure to come down here and talk to all you people. I want to thank you very much for coming.
How many survivors are left?
Now, there's 115, as we understand. We do have some magnets up here. If anybody didn't get one, why come up here and give themselves one.
I talked to Mr. McDonald one day, and he said he went to one group, and 8 people showed up. So that scared me. And then somebody else told me, well, it might be 200 here. Well, that scared me. So I think we had just about the right amount. So I appreciate everybody coming out. This is the end of the formal part of the program. I encourage some of you that we stay around, talk to some of the family members, maybe look at a few of the displays. With Mr. Barksdale, who is active in the Survivors Organization, he and his wife, you see them, are both considered honorary survivors, have brought a few items down. We cannot sell anything in the library because it's, that is their policy, and I understand it. But they do have order forms if you'd like maybe a t-shirt or a shirt or a cap or something like that. But they do have them on display. Like I say, take a few minutes if you would please, talk to the families, talk to Mr. O'Donnell. If you have a copy of the book, he'd be glad to sign it. Nancy, is she still here? Okay. She is probably glad to see this program over. Because I won't be coming to the library every day at noon. And as my wife says, getting her one of my looks. So I'm not sure what that is. But I do appreciate the assistance of Nancy and the other people of the library staff have given. I think they presented some fine materials and gave us some nice locations. Final comment, the reunion I went to in August, there was one moment that I'm not trying to make anything out of this or making any kind of great statement, but one moment as I was walking down the stairs last evening, standing in a circle, there were some Indianapolis survivors, Captain McVeigh's son, General Tibbetts, who was the pilot of the Enola Gay, and standing with him and talking was the granddaughter of the Japanese submarine commander. And like I said, I don't, you can make what you want out of that. But to me, that was kind of a moment for that particular weekend. So I thank you all for attending. Once again, I particularly thank the family members, and I thank Mr. O'Donnell for making the trip down to Indianapolis. And I thank the people that are